Hello YouTube, this is Sam from Tiger Schooling. In this session of the video, we're actually going to talk about the scrotum, testis and epididymis. So in order to understand the whole concept and the whole idea and what structures are inside the scrotum and the testis and the epididymis, we must understand this figure. So first I'm going to label this diagram so you can understand what is in this figure, and then we're going to talk about each and every topic. So this is the cut section, half of your scrotum. This is your half scrotum and half is on the other side. So I have cut it in a vertical direction, and you can see the cut section of the scrotum. So that is the outer layer, that is your skin, the outer layer, and this one is your skin, that is the most outer layer, and that one is your dartos muscles that give curl to your scrotum. That is the dartos muscles. As you come inside from the dartos muscle, you'll find that there is a fascia. You call it the Colles fascia. Colles fascia. And furthermore, as you go inside from the Colles fascia, you find another structure which we call the external spermatic fascia. So we got the skin, we got dartos muscle, Colles fascia, then we have is the external spermatic fascia, and you go inside, you find out another layer. You call that layer as cremasteric fascia. That is the cremasteric fascia, right? And you go further inside, you find another structure, that is the internal spermatic fascia. This guy arises from the epineuritis of external oblique, there is epineuritis of internal oblique, and this is from the transversus. So internal spermatic fascia. Alright, and you further go inside, you find this big color that I've drawn in the color of it's in a green color. It is called the tunica vaginalis, right? Tunica vaginalis, which is the remaining part of your another structure which I've talked about already, tunica vaginalis. And inside the tunica vaginalis, there's another structure that is covering up the outer layer, covering the outer layer of your scrotum, your testis. This is called, you call that structure that is crossing it, you call this tunica albuginea, right? You call it tunica albuginea. All right, inside that we have got these little structure, we call them seminiferous tubules, and these are separated by each other by a lobule, so that keep it that way. This structure is called vas deferens. We have talked about vas deferens already. So this is where vas deferens, and that is your epididymis. That is your epididymis. All right. So I hope I have cleared the basic structure, or I have labeled the diagram. Now let's talk about furthermore. We'll start by the scrotum. So remember, the scrotum is nothing, just an outpouching of your lower part of the anterior abdominal wall. So what it contains, the scrotum it itself contains your testis and your epididymis. Remember that. It contains your testis, epididymis, and lower part of the spermatic cord. Remember, we have talked about the spermatic cord already. It also contains the lower part of your spermatic cord. So your scrotum, which is covered by your skin. So skin is actually thick. Remember this one. This skin of the scrotum is thick, wrinkled, and pigmented, and which actually forms a single part. So which is actually, the skin is covering the whole scrotum together. Like there's a not differentiating point. For example, if you got two testes, doesn't mean your skin is separating both. No, skin is not separating. It's covering the whole scrotum. And now if we talk about, as we go inside, we talk about the superficial fascia, because after skin we come across the superficial fascia. Remember, the superficial fascia has two parts. The external part is your dartos muscle. The first part is your dartode muscle, and your second part is your Colles fascia. Look, we got a skin, then we cross the superficial fascia. So superficial consists of both of these structures, your dartos muscle and the Colles fascia. The outer layer, your dartos muscle, and the inner layer, your Colles fascia, which is actually a membranous structure, or you can say membranous in a membranous layer. Alright, so this is about the skin, and this is about the superficial fascia, which has two parts. That is dartos muscle, the external one. The internal one is called the Colles fascia, which is nothing, just a membrane. As we go inside, we find three other structures, which are spermatic fascia. We studied earlier the spermatic fascia cover up these what we call the spermatic cord as well, but we know that we have three layers of the spermatic fascia. So what are those layers of spermatic fascia? We know as we go inside the Colles fascia, we find out three layers of spermatic fascia. Remember, first layer is your external spermatic fascia, which is actually derived from your epineurus of your external oblique muscle. And as you go inside, we find another layer is called the cremasteric fascia, which is also derived from your epineurus of the internal oblique muscle, and your internal spermatic fascia is derived from your transversalis muscle. You can say the fascia transversalis, because as the testes descend down, it kind of bring all the layer downward, kind of drag all the layers downward with it. That's why all of these structure forming the outer boundaries of this layer. As we go inside, we find other few structures, but which are related with your testes. In this thing, we talked about the cremasteric fascia and internal structure. We have even talked about this internal spermatic fascia. Remember this one, the cremasteric fascia. Actually, if we are going to study the clinical of it, we talk about something called cremasteric reflex. We call it cremasteric reflex. What is cremasteric reflex? We should understand it. So cremasteric reflex is nothing. What happens? It's actually the contraction of your cremasteric muscle. You know, when when you stroke the superior and medial border of your upper thigh, that part, because there are a few nerves that cross this area, so that part actually causes the cremasteric fascia, or this part here, to contract. That's why we feel a reflex. That's reflection is called the cremasteric reflex. So what is the if you're asking about the function of the cremasteric reflex, so if somebody is asking you the function, you will be saying it actually raise your testes, right? If due to when somebody even strokes you due to cremasteric reflex, you can raise your testes, but as well it can also it can raise your testes, and as well as scrotum upwards. Why it is taking your scrotum upwards? It's because of one reason is warmth, giving it warmth, and second is the protection against injury. So this muscle layer, the cremasteric reflex, the cremasteric fascia, is very helpful against it helps you in keeping the testes warm and providing the protection. Alright, so as we go further inside from the cremasteric fascia, we got internal spermatic fascia. From internal spermatic fascia, we encounter this big structure in green color. We call it the tunica vaginalis. So tunica vaginalis is nothing, we have already talked about it. So it's actually the lower expanded part of your process vaginalis. Remember process vaginalis, we talked about it. Process vaginalis was just a peritoneal folding, nothing else. It was a pouch, peritoneal pouch, which extended downward, and that when it descends downward, it can cut off, and the remaining part of that tunica of that process vaginalis, we call it the tunica vaginalis. So what if somebody asking you what is tunica vaginalis, you will be saying it is the lower expanded part of your process vaginalis. What happens, you know, just before birth, it become shut off from the upper part of your you know, you can peritoneum or your peritoneal cavity, and come downwards. That's why it is covering the testis now. So that's why we're calling it the tunica vaginalis. Now let's talk about the testis itself. We're done with the scrotum. We have talked about what is scrotum and all that. Now